The trooper kept looking at the screen like it was lying to him. His patrol cruiser idled on the gravel shoulder of Route 9, the engine making that soft, uneven hum every police car eventually developed after about 60,000 miles of abuse. The red and blue lights strobed silently across the empty stretch of highway and the pine trees beyond it. Midnight traffic had thinned to the occasional semi-groaning past. The driver of the black Chevy Tahoe stood beside the rear bumper, hands on the roof where the trooper had told him to place them. He didn't look nervous. That was the thing. Most people got nervous during a stop at 1 in the morning on a 2-lane state highway outside a small Pennsylvania town. They shifted weight, asked questions, looked at their phone. This guy didn't move. Early 40s maybe, clean haircut, white button-down shirt rolled at the sleeves, a faint smell of expensive cologne that drifted whenever the night breeze shifted. Trooper Daniel Hargrove leaned back into the cruiser and tapped the keyboard again. The registration had come back clean. Too clean. The Tahoe was registered to a small medical supply company in Delaware, perfectly current plates, insurance verified. No warrants on the driver. But the name still felt wrong in Hargrove's mouth. Gregory Salter, he muttered. He glanced at the man in the side mirror. Salter stared ahead at the dark road like he was waiting for a late train. Dispatch, Hargrove said into the radio. Unit 214, can you run that name again, full check, see if anything pops federal side. Static. Then the dispatcher's tired voice. Copy 214, stand by. Hargrove rubbed his jaw. It wasn't a crime to be calm. But the calm felt rehearsed. He stepped out of the cruiser again, gravel crunching under his boots. Mr. Salter, he said casually. The man turned his head slightly. Yes, officer. Polite, controlled. You said you're headed to Harrisburg tonight. That's right. Medical delivery. Correct. Late for that, isn't it? Salter shrugged a shoulder without taking his hands off the roof. Hospital schedules don't sleep. Hargrove nodded slowly. He had heard worse lies. Behind them, a tractor-trailer blasted past, rattling the Tahoe slightly. Mind if I take a quick look in the cargo area? Salter didn't answer right away. Just a second. A tiny pause. Then he said, Do you have a reason, officer? Still polite. But now there was something under it. Hargrove noticed everything. 23 years in uniform taught him how small details moved before bigger ones. I'm just doing my job, he said. Salter looked at him carefully now. Not angry. Evaluating. Then he gave a soft sigh. You know, he said quietly, I work with hospitals all over the state. I deal with law enforcement procurement departments too. I know my rights. Hargrove nodded again. Never doubted that. The radio cracked. 214 dispatch. Hargrove turned his shoulder. Go ahead. A pause. Then the dispatcher again, slower this time. Driver comes back clean, but hold on. Papers rustled over the radio. Vehicle shows up in a transport registry, medical waste carrier. Hargrove frowned. That right. Yeah, but there's a note attached. What kind of note? Another pause. State health compliance flag. Hargrove looked at the Tahoe again. Flag for what? The dispatcher inhaled audibly. It says missing audit paperwork. Silence stretched between the cruiser and the Tahoe. Hargrove glanced back at Salter. The man was watching him now. Still calm. But the stillness had changed shape. Hargrove walked over. Go ahead and open the rear hatch for me. Salter tilted his head. Is that a request? It is. And if I declined? Then I'll get a warrant. Salter studied him. The red lights washed across his face again and again. Finally he smiled a little. Sure, he said. He reached into his pocket slowly and pressed the key fob. The Tahoe chirped. The rear hatch lifted with a soft electric whir. Hargrove stepped closer. The cargo area was packed with sealed gray medical transport bins. Industrial plastic containers, locking lids, biohazard stickers. Everything looked legitimate. Except for one thing. They were spotless. Too spotless. Real medical waste transport always smelled. Even sealed. These bins didn't. Hargrove leaned in and tapped one with his knuckle. Solid. Heavy. What's inside? He asked. Expired surgical kits, Salter said. Disposable instruments. Heading for incineration. Hargrove nodded. Then he noticed the labels. Each bin had a printed tracking barcode. Except one. A single container in the back corner had a blank tag. No barcode. Just white plastic. He pointed. That one. Salter didn't move. That container, Hargrove repeated, open it. Salter's jaw tightened slightly. Just slightly. Those are sealed for transport. I understand. They require documentation to open. Hargrove didn't move either. Then we'll do the documentation right here. A long moment passed. Wind rustled the trees. Finally, Salter walked to the back and unclipped the container lid. It opened slowly. Inside were smaller sealed packages, wrapped in sterile blue surgical cloth. Neatly stacked. Hargrove lifted one. It was heavier than surgical tools should be. He peeled back the cloth. Inside was a thick envelope. The flap already cut. He opened it. Cash. Stacks of $100 bills. Neat rubber bands. Hargrove stared for a second. Then looked up. Salter didn't look surprised anymore. He looked tired. How much? Hargrove asked. About 300,000, Salter said quietly. The trooper blinked. You're transporting cash in a biohazard bin. Salter shrugged again. Discretion. Hargrove closed the envelope. You want to explain that? Salter's eyes drifted toward the dark road. You wouldn't believe me if I did. That was the first moment Trooper Daniel Hargrove realized the traffic stop was no longer about a moving violation. And it would take 8 months before anyone understood what that single blank label in a transport record really meant. 8 months earlier, nobody in the Pennsylvania Department of Health had noticed the mistake. The record sat in a shared server folder labeled Waste Compliance 2024. Thousands of spreadsheets. Quarterly transport manifests. Most people skimmed them. Except Claire Whitaker. Claire sat at a gray cubicle desk in a building that used to be a textile factory outside Harrisburg. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Her job title sounded impressive on paper. Regulatory data analyst. In reality, she reviewed forms. Hundreds every week. Medical waste shipments had strict tracking laws. Every container from a hospital had to be logged, barcoded, weighed, and accounted for until destruction. Most entries were routine. Hospitals shipped used surgical kits, contaminated gloves, expired medications. But on a damp Tuesday morning, Claire noticed something small. One row in a spreadsheet didn't match. The container ID existed. But the weight column was blank. Not zero. Blank. She leaned closer. The shipment was from St. Augustine Medical Center outside Scranton. Carrier company, Northeastern Biomedical Transport. Destination, incineration facility in Lancaster County. Claire tapped the keyboard. Pulled up the shipment history. The container number appeared again. 6 weeks later. Different hospital. Same carrier. Again the weight field blank. She frowned. Normally missing data meant sloppy paperwork. But the container ID itself shouldn't repeat. Each bin was serialized. She checked again. Same number. Same carrier. Different locations. That meant one of two things. Either someone copied records incorrectly, or the same container was being logged in multiple shipments. Claire leaned back slowly. Then she opened the carrier's company profile. Northeastern Biomedical Transport. Small fleet. 5 trucks. Operated out of a warehouse outside Reading. License for statewide hospital pickups. Nothing unusual. Still, something bothered her. She opened the master log. Scrolled. The container ID appeared again. And again. Over 14 months. Different hospitals. Same carrier. Same missing weight entry. Claire rubbed her temple. The numbers didn't scream corruption. They whispered sloppiness. But whispers sometimes hid bigger things. She created a small note in the system. Audit request. Routine. Nothing urgent. Just one line. Container ID B74319 missing weight verification across multiple shipments. Recommend carrier record review. She saved the file and moved on to the next spreadsheet. By the time she left work that afternoon, she had already forgotten about it. But 3 weeks later, the note landed on the desk of a state police compliance officer who hated paperwork almost as much as he hated quiet patterns. That officer was Daniel Hargrove. And the first thing he noticed wasn't the missing weight. It was the number of hospitals using the same container. Which wasn't supposed to happen. Ever. Daniel Hargrove had been a trooper long enough to know most crimes didn't start with gunshots. They started with something boring. A receipt that didn't match. A license plate that didn't exist. A missing signature on a form. He sat in his patrol car outside the reading warehouse 3 weeks after Claire's note arrived. The building looked exactly like every logistics warehouse in central Pennsylvania. Corrugated metal siding. A faded company logo. 2 white box trucks parked beside a loading dock. No activity. Hargrove sipped stale coffee and watched. It was a routine compliance check. At least on paper. He had requested transport records from the company earlier that week. They had emailed spreadsheets immediately. Too quickly. Companies that fast usually had good bookkeeping. Or something to hide. He watched the loading bay doors. 10 minutes passed. Then one of them opened halfway. A forklift rolled out carrying gray medical bins. Hargrove lowered his binoculars slightly. The bins looked identical to every other regulated waste container in the country. But he was waiting for a number. The forklift operator stacked the containers on a pallet. Hargrove zoomed in. One barcode label faced his direction. He read the digits. B74319. The same container. The one Claire had flagged. Except there were 6 of them. Same ID. Same number. Same label. 6 identical bins. Hargrove lowered the binoculars slowly. That wasn't paperwork error. That was duplication. And duplication meant someone had printed fake labels. He grabbed the radio. Dispatch, this is 214. Go ahead. I'm going to request a regulatory inspection unit and possibly Department of Health oversight. What's the situation? Hargrove kept watching the forklift. Either these guys can't count or someone's running a transport scheme. Copy. He paused. Then added quietly. And if it's the second one, it's bigger than missing paperwork. Inside the warehouse, Gregory Salter was reviewing inventory logs when his floor manager knocked on the office door. Greg. Salter looked up from the computer. What? There's a state trooper outside. Salter's expression didn't change. But he closed the spreadsheet slowly. Did he come in? No. Just sitting in the lot. Salter stood and walked to the office window. Through the blinds he could see the cruiser parked across the road. Idle. Watching. He stayed there a long moment. Then he asked one question. Which containers are being loaded right now? The manager hesitated. B series. Salter closed his eyes briefly. Then he sighed. Stop the forklift. Why? Just do it. Down on the warehouse floor, the forklift engine cut off. Outside, Trooper Hargrove noticed immediately. The sudden stillness. Machines didn't stop mid-shift without reason. He lifted the binoculars again. The warehouse doors slid shut. Someone inside knew he was watching. And suddenly, the tiny detail Claire Whittaker had noticed weeks earlier didn't look like sloppy paperwork anymore. It looked like the edge of something buried very deep. 8 months later, standing beside the Tahoe with $300,000 in a biohazard container, Hargrove finally understood just how deep it went. He closed the envelope slowly. "Mr. Salter," he said, "you're going to turn around and place your hands behind your back." Salter didn't argue. He just nodded once. As Hargrove snapped the cuffs on, he said something quiet. "You know the funny part." "What's that?" Salter looked at the flashing lights reflecting off the highway. "All of this started with a spreadsheet." Hargrove didn't answer. But he already knew. And somewhere in Harrisburg, Claire Whittaker would soon learn that the smallest detail in a forgotten record had just triggered one of the largest financial crime investigations the state had seen in decades. The wind moved through the trees. The Tahoe engine ticked softly as it cooled. And the night suddenly felt a lot less quiet than it had an hour earlier.